Maybe let's start from the beginning. Could you guys introduce yourself, letting everyone know like your name, where you're from, and where you're living now, and what your occupations are?
Okay, so do you want to go first?
Okay, so I'm Jess. I'm from Worthing, was born in Worthing. I'm here now. And I'm mothering and, housekeeping, nurturing everyone all the time, full time. That's it really.
Okay.
Well, that's it. There's a lot.
That's a lot. That is a big responsibility.
What's your background in?
My background is in fitness, then yoga, then talking circles. Mainly like group work, women's work. Yeah.
And was that you did all of that in Worthing, or you did some of that in London? What's the?
So there's a lot of food in there as well. Actually, a lot of plant-based food. Well, even before plant-based, I did an apprenticeship in chefing. I'm not actually sure what the qualification was, but I worked in a kitchen, professional kitchen, when I was 17. And then we had the cafe together, plant-based cafe in West Norwood. It'll pop up at the Portico. And then so it was all obviously kind of crossed over. When I went vegan, cooking and experimenting with cooking was a big passion. And I find it really hard to like not go off on 100 tangents.
No worries. We'll come back. We'll go all over the place. Yeah, don't worry.
There's so many crossovers. But
intersections. Right?
Food, health, fitness, lifestyle, I suppose.
Okay.
So started in Worthing, took it to London when we first met. Eddie was doing a lot of pop-ups, obviously dinner clubs. That was how you guys met. So I just kind of joined Team Mango and started doing the pop-ups too, because obviously my background was cooking and so we joined forces.
Awesome. And you Eddie, what's your background? Or should I say, how do I introduce yourself first? Say your name and.
Okay, so I'm Eddie. I'm originally from London, from round the corner, from South London, and been in Worthing for 5 years. Jess captured me from London and kidnapped me and brought me to Worthing, and I never looked back. Background is in personal training, holistic health, teaching yoga and men's coaching, and chefing. So big part of what I was doing with the business in London was running a catering business alongside my personal training and coaching business. So we were started with pop-ups. You came to one of the first pop-ups at my mum's house. There's about 8 of us around that table. Yeah. And that grew until we had to put an extension on the table, and then we had to look for spaces, and then we started hiring out restaurants, and then I got pretty much kind of given a cafe to run, kind of just landed on my lap.
To build,
we had to build it first. Built the cafe, did that for a bit, then realised I didn't want to do that because it was just so much work. Right? Being in food is just big up anyone who's in that business. It's a hard business. So we closed the cafe. That's when we moved to Worthing. Carried on catering, cooking for like retreats, all plant-based at the time. Cooking for retreats, day retreats, weekend retreats, week retreats, all of that business. And that was all under the umbrella of health.
Okay.
So movement, health, fitness, well-being. But I haven't done catering for a while. If I run retreats, I'll cook the food for my retreats, but that's about it.
Okay.
I don't do this anymore.
All right.
We've been talking about getting back into we missed dinner clubs.
Yeah.
It blew up. It blew up so big that we stopped enjoying it. So when we was running the cafe, I was like, I don't enjoy this anymore. But I would love to come back to do dinner clubs and doing meat-based dinner clubs.
There was a lot of shift at the time as well. So there was the lockdown. There was we were expecting our first son, and then we had quite a lot of catering stuff lined up. But then food and events were one of the last things, obviously, to come back into real life.
Yeah.
And so we put a pause on, and a lot of just after we closed the cafe, we were on our way to do our teacher training, yoga teacher training in Ecuador together, and when we got back and we were doing all these retreats and dinner clubs and things, it then kind of everything grinded to a halt. Then we had our baby and other things kicked kicked off, and it was just sort of like catering was then like it's a big effort. So with the newborn and other projects starting to kind of flower, it was like and then our transition from being vegan to eating meat.
Yeah.
A lot for us to work out, and so it wouldn't have been authentic to do a dinner club, vegan or not vegan, because we were still working it all out.
Yeah.
But now that we're feeling really, really grounded in the way that we're eating and kind of living and working with our food and lifestyle, it's like something that, I'd probably say in the last 3 months we've had quite a lot of discussions about, this would be good on a table for other people. And
that's awesome. Well, definitely put us down, because we would be up for that. We enjoyed the food when you were plant-based, and I'm sure we'll enjoy the food when you're meat-based now. But talking about the plant-based stuff, like what was your, I don't know whether you had like 2 separate journeys to get to plant-based, and what your kind of reasoning was behind going plant-based.
So I accidentally became vegan.
Okay.
Plant-based, right? So I was so much to this.
Go for it.
I was massive, PT, so big into my training, and I was experiencing lots of injuries and pain in my body. I was into bodybuilding at the time. I wasn't able to lift. Wasn't great in my mental health, because I wasn't able to do the things I was doing, and I needed some sort of change. And I was following a lot of plant-based sort of athletes at the time. I was kind of like getting influenced by them. And I was moving more into like calisthenics, coming away from bodybuilding, getting into yoga, finding new ways to move my body. And along with that, I was reducing the amount of meat I was eating. So it started with just like 1 meal a day without meat. That was huge, right? Just 1 meal. Then it was like 2 meals. And then it was like a whole day. And then it was like 1 or 2 days a week. And then suddenly it'd been like 2 weeks and I hadn't eaten meat. And I was like, this is like over a course of like six to 9 months. And I was like, okay, I'm not even missing it. Like I actually feel really good. So I didn't really eat dairy anyway. I wasn't a fan of yogurt or milk. Probably having some butter here and there. And then I was like, I could maybe do this vegan thing, because I'm kind of already there anyway. Let's just consciously take away the animal fats. I'm already not eating the meat. And kind of fell into veganism. And this was a time when veganism was just at the cusp before it blew up, right? So this was before fast food joints.
Yes.
Chicken. This is before fake bacon. Or you used to get some fake meat, but
I like to say before steakhouses had plant-based options.
Exactly. Before all that stuff, before all the nut milks were out there. You had to go to a special shop to get your nut milk. So I was a whole food vegan. I was a whole food plant-based. So in that transition, I felt amazing. I felt so good. So I felt good. So I started to preach it. Started telling other people, this is what you need to be doing. Started to go into it more. Started to identify veganism, plant-based. And that was my entry into it. That was the entry.
Very similar to me. Like before, so our mutual friend Luke, who introduced me to who kind of introduced me to your dinners. Like I was kind of years before that, I was kind of whole food vegan. And he was like, no, you're doing it all wrong. You can't just be eating nuts and salads and stuff. You need to have like this kind of like gourmet vegan stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. So he introduced me to that world, which was nice. The food was it was better than eating nuts and seeds all the time. But so it's a similar background. And how about you, Jess? What was your entry into veganism?
It was a lot more fast and furious, I'd say. There was a little bit of a build-up, which was an interest in Buddhism and meditation. So I'd been doing a lot of Zumba classes at the gym, and just started to. Me and my best friend went into the weights room one day. We'd seen a woman in America somewhere lifting weights and doing kickbacks on the cables, and we marched in there like, we're going to do this. And that was kind of the journey that I was on. But the real thing was, getting into Buddhism. like 16 at the time, 15, 16, still at school. And had this really great teacher who introduced me and would sort of like do guided meditations with me. There was a lot of like stress and anxiety at that time that brought me to Buddhism. And then I just remember reading this one chapter about energy in the body, keeping the channels clean by being vegetarian, basically. And that was the seed. And I sort of played around with it, but still living at home, eating whatever my mum cooked, whatever was in the house was kind of ruling until I found Cowspiracy.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
And the next day, I went and took my whatever my like pocket money was, or I think I had a part-time job, and just spent right, Alpro, soya, everything, loads of fruit, and that same sort of nuts and seeds flex. I didn't know what vegan food was, so I just tried to eat what I'd been eating and take all the meat and the dairy and stuff out and replace it. But it was still very much like, I remember when Koyo came out probably 6 months into that journey, and it was just like revolutionary. Coconut yogurt. But it was almost sort of, the next day. I never looked back. I went from being like, yeah, maybe one day, to falling out with my mum on a daily, like, I just won't eat this anymore. She was like, this is your favourite food. And I was like, no, I can't do it, it's murder. I'd walk past, I'd come home from work and look at everyone and go, because they were just, I was very self-righteous vegan. But same as Eddie, I went from kind of not really having any awareness around what I was eating to being hyper-focused on sort of cleanliness. It was a very energetic approach to, I wanted to meditate and be clear. And so that was obviously a huge detox, which felt really good. And I was training a lot, so it was probably detoxing, like it was all very supported. And it felt great. So I think we actually went vegan, but it was before we met each other. But I think in the same year, because we were when we, how long have you been vegan when we first met? Yeah. It's like, yeah, me too.
So you both passed, right?
We both passed.
Oh yeah, certified.
Yeah, certified.
So, okay. So what's interesting for me is the fact that you were both vegans before you met. Your identities were kind of entrenched in plant-based and veganism. So, like, I can understand one person's journey from going to plant-based to meat-based, but as a couple, was there any kind of resistance between? Well, okay, I'm going to ask you two questions. One, what was the realization that you needed meat, and then two, how did you navigate both of your views from going from plant-based to meat-based?
So I was the problem with this.
Okay.
So
well, I just said there was
not the problem, but
yes.
I was the one. I was the guy with the resistance for this one. And looking back, it's mainly because I had identified so much with it. I'd built a business around it, and there was some shame around that as well. There'd be some shame around coming back after being so self-righteous with it. So basically, Jess was already. I think the really interesting point is to note that we were vegan for the same amount of time. So I think we started to hit what I call the vegan wall, right? Between year 3 and 5.
All the B12 was running out.
Yeah, right. So we're vegan for like 5 or 6 years or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting point that we'd been on that journey for a similar amount of time. So basically, I think we both were starting to run into that wall, that health, right? And I remember in the summer, like Jess she wanted to eat eggs around her bleed, and to me it made sense. I was like, well, that's a period. You're on your period. You're losing blood. Okay, that I can understand that, and if that's what you want to do. But I'm not eating eggs, right? I'm not going to eat eggs.
I think this was when it's important to say as well, we'd just come back from Ecuador, and you were you'd gone back to London, and I'd gone back to Worthing, because I'd come back to my job here, and you had clients in London, so we decided to live apart for a bit, and we were thinking about eventually moving to Worthing, but there's a lot of farm shops, a lot of, drive somewhere and people just have eggs outside their house, or Dad's been doing the same job for quite a long time, and he's got a lot of close clients who will be like, here's some lemons from our tree in Sicily, or here's chicken that we just killed that used to live in our garden.
Yeah.
So I've been very immersed in that. And one of the blocks to coming away from being vegan for us both was like thinking there's no, is that quote? There's no humane way to kill an animal. Getting stuck on that.
Yeah.
And kind of thinking, well, there's no okay way to do this. I can get my head around the fact that, you know, when I'm bleeding, I might need this extra support from the fat and all the other things that are in eggs, but I can't go and buy them from, you know, Tesco or, but all of these options in front of me of things that actually felt very, ethical and local, which is really important. But that's harder for you to see because you'd always been in London.
You was closer to,
and everything's just industrial.
Yeah. And understanding like the pendulum from like industrial farming to regenerative farming. And when you're vegan, all you focus on is industrial farming, right? And that's what you're told about in these documentaries that you're watching. That's what you're kind of being indoctrinated into thinking is the only way you eat animals is through this horrible, inhumane practice of industrial farming. And there's a whole other world to explore. But so going back onto health, I was not very well, right? I've been working really hard. I was running this calf. I was tired all the time. I was getting injured. I'd stopped training. I stopped training in about year 3 of veganism. And I was going deep into my yoga, and I was using yoga as an excuse not to look at why I can't get in the weights room. Every time I got in the weights room, I'd injure myself. Yeah. Right? So I decided not to look at that and decided to continue with my yoga practice. Then it got to a point I was injuring myself in yoga. I'd be going through a chaturanga or something and I'd hurt my shoulder, or I'd go into an up dog and I'd hurt my back, and then it was taking me a long time to recover. So I'm starting to think, right, something's not right here, right? I'm tired all the time. I'm a bit dazed. I felt I'll talk about this fog a bit later, but I was a bit dazed. I kept on getting injured. I was looking within the parameters of veganism to fix that. Okay. Right? I was chasing how I felt in that first year to 2 years of veganism. I was trying to replicate that. So I'd done fruitarian, I'd done fasting, I'd done high fat, I'd done low fat, I'd done raw, I'd done cooked, I'd done every I'd done all the supplements, I'd done every variation you can think of within the vegan parameters I had explored, and I still didn't feel good. And there's Jess eating some eggs once a month. So that was like subconsciously coming into my psyche. And then we'd finished our training in Ecuador. It's very deep training. I was absolutely fucked by the end of this training, right? It was 3 weeks, deep yoga work, some shamanic work as well, like some ceremonies. It was a big excavation of like an emotional excavation. We finished the course. We went off into the mountains to chill. And I was so depleted. And there's chickens everywhere, right? And Jess was like, just eat some eggs, man. Like, just try it, eat some eggs. And I was looking around and said, right, if I'm going to eat an egg anywhere in the world, it's going to be up here in this mountain in Ecuador where I can see all the chickens. Let me eat this egg. So we made fried eggs, had 2 eggs.
True Mango Man style. Yeah. You know, like some random little shop in Ecuador. He's like, right, get this random bag of spices, get some beans. Yeah. Shove it up. It's the best thing I've ever eaten.
I kid you not, right? I'm eating these eggs and this veil just went vroom. Wow. This fog that I didn't know I had. It'd come on so slowly over 5 years that I did not know I had this fog. Eating these eggs, and suddenly I felt life come back into my body. I felt my brain go just fire up. And then I ate about 4 to 5 eggs or 6 eggs every day for the rest of the time in Ecuador. Every morning I'd get up, let's go eat these eggs. And with every day I felt stronger. Mentally, I felt more grounded. I was very esoteric. I was very not in my body. I was very spiritual, too much so. And then as soon as I started to eat the eggs, I started to ground.
And right? I think an important part, just to interrupt while we're still talking about being in Ecuador, an important part of the spiritual process while we were there was I'd come from this Buddhist approach of, you know, you can't eat meat and meditate at the same time. You can't do energy work if you've got dead in your belly. And then we were working with these shamans who were doing just the most incredible things. And
so connected.
And then we'd go, you know, at the end of the day to the restaurant together and they'd eat a big bit of steak or something. And it was infuriating at the time. were being like, who's this like shaman?
Yeah.
Who's this? You can't, but I'd just seen it and felt it and been in the experience. And that's obviously when you're so kind of wrapped up in that identity, it was really hard to let that resistance melt away and understand that a few things can be true at once.
Yeah.
And that people can actually be really grounded. And what we got to experience when we were there as well was like a deep reverence and connection to the spirit of animals before you eat them. There was a whole 12-hour ceremony in the equinox. We were there in September. Was it equinox?
Yeah, well, for them it was spring equinox.
Yeah, so it would have been solstice over here. And was it? Yeah. No, it was equinox, just spring, just autumn here. So yeah, it was spring equinox there, and they were like praying over this meat for, like 12, 14 hours up all night, just like crying, sobbing, spilling prayers, and then ceremoniously breaking the fast and merging with that. Was what we were taught there, is that, it's about consciously connecting and kind of embodying the spirit and the strength of that animal, because a lot of these animals were, they're deer or big strong cows.
Ruminant animals.
Yeah. And again, at the time, I couldn't really see the value. It was like, I'm very happy that I got to see it firsthand, but at the time it was just, I had a lot of sticky feelings about it. But it's just something that has made more and more sense the further away I've got from veganism. It's like, no, this is.
I was going to ask, like, what were the eating habits of the people on the course? But you've answered that now. But then, so in your kind of realization or your observation of, these shamans eating meat, did you ever question them, or was this just something that you decided to kind of sit back and observe?
I questioned it.
Did you question them?
Yes, I questioned. It was Tati, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I questioned because I kicked off one day because they served fish.
Okay.
The course was a vegetarian. When you do one of these courses where everything is catered and accommodation, so it was
supposed to be vegetarian.
It was a vegetarian advert.
I was so offended.
And then the fish.
It was like day 8, and I came in, there was fish, and I was like, "What is this?" And I went to the course organizer, and I said, "No," and I kicked off. I can't believe it. Looking back, I just have to laugh, basically. But I had deep respect for Tati, the shaman we was working with, and I didn't question her with the same sort of authority that I talked to the course organizer. I just questioned it. I didn't understand it, because I'd always kind of learned, keep the vessel clean. Eastern philosophy, which,
and we were in South America, so it's really different.
But which is true, and this is another thing to tap on. Like, veganism is amazing if implemented correctly for the right amount of time, with the right seasons, in the right time in your life. I don't believe anything should be lifelong, because we're cyclical animals, right? So I'll get into meat-based as well, because we don't call ourselves meat-based. Okay, we are animal-centered. Okay, so the central part of our diet, our plants, is built around animals, right? Whether that's animal fat, eggs, fish, flesh, bones. But I had been strict meat-based for a long time as well, so I've experienced that. And now I wouldn't like to label what we are now, right? Because there's a danger now that I'm seeing this within the worlds, especially like the carnivore world, the meat-based world, the keto world. It's just veganism rebranded.
100%.
And it's the same propaganda, it's the same approaches, and it creates the same divide, and it creates the same problem with how we view foods.
Yeah.
Where's the human?
It's the humans that are the problem.
Spoil it, yeah. Like I was...
I'm very aware not to relive... I'm very aware to learn my lessons from veganism
100%.
and not put brackets around my health.
100%.
So we'll get into like how we eat now in a bit, I guess.
Well, I was gonna say, so this identity thing, it seems to be like quite a big thing when people label themselves as vegan this, on their handles on social, vegan this, carnivore that, blah blah blah. The reason why I called this project Meat-Based Heals is because I kind of look at it as like foundational. So it's not like You can be meat-based and you can still eat plants. You can be meat-based and you can be strict carnivore. You can be meat-based and be keto, whatever it is. And funnily enough, like last week, I've been part of this group called Carnivore Bodybuilding on Facebook. And I found it interesting. Some of the stuff that I've commented on, talking about what I think is the importance of potentially eating fruit or eating vegetation that is like has like a high water content, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not so convinced that like you're drinking water there. I've got a bit of water here as well. I'm not so convinced that we should be drinking as much water as we do. Maybe we should consume it in a crystallized fruit form or vegetable form. So
we can get into this.
So a couple of times I've posted stuff about that on the page, and some people have been like, oh yeah, this sounds right, or this sounds good, and then then it's just kind of got a couple of likes. And then recently I posted a breakfast that I had with my daughter that had sweet potato in it. And then the comments just came through like, sweet potato isn't carnivore. Maybe you should post this in the keto group. And I just went off because I'm like, this is the tiniest little piece of sweet potato that's in this meal. And I feel that the majority of the meal is meat based, right? Mm-hmm. And it is in keeping in the spirit, or what I thought is the spirit of carnivore bodybuilding, even though it's not 100% strict. So anyway, I ended up arguing with all of these different people. They started getting quite personal and all of this stuff. Insults were thrown. If the insults came to me, I'd kind of throw them back in like a funny kind of like, silly way. But eventually, the next day, I logged onto the group and I couldn't find the group. Basically, I've been blocked. And I was like, oh, this is crazy.
This is the problem.
This is madness. But it's one of the things that I find is if you identify too much with your diet, it can prevent you from healing. So like what you said about, your diet being cyclical, like I think that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Like, you should nourish your body with what it needs. I do now kind of lean to the fact that I feel that meat is a superfood. And I think that, a lot of people would do good incorporating it into their diet, and it shouldn't be vilified like it has been vilified, either from a health perspective or from a ethical perspective. And, whether you choose to eat plants or fruits as well is kind of up to you. You test it out, see what, works with you. But yeah, going back to how you describe the way you eat, could you put a percentage on how much meat is in your diet, roughly?
So we're slightly different.
Yeah. Eddie eats a lot more meat than I do.
So my diet, like my plate is like 70% meat. Sometimes 80%. 9 times out of 10, my breakfast is just meat and eggs. I might have a banana with that. Might have some bread with it. Might have a sandwich every now and then. Yeah. But generally, like 9 times out of 10, my morning meal is eggs, steak, eggs, bacon. If I feel like I need a lot of, if I know I'm going to go for a training session, I might have a banana with that. But generally, it's just meat and eggs for breakfast. I often take lunch out with me, a steak in a Tupperware, some boiled eggs, and then dinner I just eat whatever for dinner. We'll just cook whatever, but it's normally centered around some sort of meat.
I'd say that meat, is always kind of at the heart of what we're eating, like as a meal. It always starts with, so like going back to, my kind of role right now being the nourisher of the family, is a better word for that. But it will always start with like some sort of animal, either a fat and then build a dish on that, or I feel like eating beef, so I'm going to find a recipe for beef, whatever's growing, whatever's around. There's a lovely farm shop on the way to, so the nursery that our children go to is 45-minute drive away. We chose it based on the location and based on the ethos of the school. Yeah. Hence why it's so far away. It was not really like, we'll put them in childcare for our convenience. It was like, wow, inconvenient. They've got an opportunity to go and experience this, so we will build everything else around getting them there. Yeah. And I had suspected that this farm shop that is, we are in the middle of 2 places that sell raw milk down here. So I don't know if you know of that website. real milk. Someone's created a search engine for raw milk
Awesome.
locations. It just shows a map, you put your postcode in. And so we're kind of equidistant. There's one that is a little bit further away. But we drive past it now twice a week, 4 times a week on the way there and back. So I was like, sold. Yeah. We just have to do that. And they have a lovely butcher's in there. And so they'll just have whatever they've got, you know, classic, way more traditional. Local goat, local lamb, local beef, local pork.
That's their beef, isn't it?
They do all the processing, smoking of stuff and preparation there. So that's it. That's kind of, it starts around what do we feel like we need? What do we all like? The boys have really been very meat, just like naturally meat and fruit based from birth. There was times when weaning Mars, I was like, all he's eaten for weeks, sometimes months, is blueberries and sausages.
Okay, yeah.
But that's where the philosophies and everything starts to cross over, with it being a whole lifestyle of, I trust what he wants. He was breastfed for a very long time. He wasn't that interested in food until he was, 2? I'd say not really until Xavi had come along and was almost ready to eat. Mars really just wanted breast milk and strawberries, blueberries, and fish. Actually, he will always eat fish. And obviously, being on the seafront, it's something that I feel. A lot of this for me has been about reconnecting to a bit more of an ancestral way of eating, and what would we have? And it would be like, sometimes it would be something very, very meat heavy. Other times it would be like, all you've got is some animal fat in the fridge and what's growing in the garden or what's been stored. So yeah, it's actually been really interesting process for me with this like old school wife role of making things work and being sustainable in my own kind of way, breaking away from all the sustainability propaganda and sourcing, thinking actually it's really sustainable for me to like buy a whole chicken, store the fat from it, broth up the bones, make a couple of meals out of the chicken. And that's where before we, I suppose, could get caught in the specifics, like you were saying with the sweet potato, and like this isn't that kind of, I don't know, getting stuck in the perfection of it. And it's been really freeing to, I think that's what's healing about meat-based as well. It's very freeing to break away from the brackets of veganism or the brackets of carnivore and just doing your own thing. And it's a lot of responsibility to work out what's best for all of us as a family, that's in line with the seasons, that's in line locally, that's in line with our budget, that's in line with, and also, are the children going to eat it? Which 9 times out of 10, they're hit and miss. They love the raw milk. And I just trust that, the raw milk and the fruit. Our 2-year-old, I don't remember the last time he ate. Actually, he did eat a sausage this morning. It's probably the first time for a few weeks. We've all been a little bit stuffy. And I noticed when the boys, I know when they're going to get sick because they stop eating. Yeah. They just want a lot more milk. They will only really want fruit if I ask them, or if they don't eat something. Xavi just wants oranges. Then they get snotty for a couple of days. The diet stays the same, and it's been about a week now, and they're just starting to. Mars ate 4 sausages the other day, and I'm like, right, he's getting better now because his appetite's back. That's quite a natural thing to fast and give the immune system that energy that you would be digesting food with.
Yeah, we trust them we don't panic when they don't eat. We really trust them.
There's sometimes still panic, that classic parent thing, did I offer them enough?
But we try to zoom out and even with ourselves, we look at the week, not the day.
Yeah.
Right, so like if they haven't eaten well for 2 days or eaten much for 2 days, if you zoom out, you go, well, actually, like 3 days ago, Mars ate half a kilo of beef. And the next day you might have had 4 sausages and a big bowl of potatoes or something. So we kind of look at the week, not the days. If you get caught up in the days, it gets quite stressful, right? So, and that's what I teach my clients as well, is always to zoom out. Like, don't worry about the intraday stuff. Like, zoom out to weeks and months. And you get a better perspective 100%. Overall of like what you're eating and what you need.
See, for me, what I'm trying to develop, and also trying to develop in the family, is like an intuitive way of eating. So it's not like like you get your standard breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's always kind of like you have it at this set time, that set time. But if you're not hungry, no, you don't need to eat. Or, if you're feeling like you want more beef, or you want more fruit, or you want some, I don't know, almonds, or Brazil nuts, like, tap into that, rather than kind of like this having this resistance that sometimes is a little bit societal, or like conforming, in that you should eat this way, even if you're not.
And it's
You're shaming, exactly. Yeah.
we talked about this in the car because I was meat-based for a long time, because about 9 months is when I was throwing up my pictures on Instagram that was always on the board. You always see like steak on a chopping board, like that, because it wasn't a chore. It's all I wanted. Literally all I want was like steak and berries and honey and egg and some yogurt, and I eat like that 2 to 3 times a day. Occasionally, I might have some pasta in the evening if she cooks some pasta, but pretty much for 9 months I was meat and fruit, because that's what I wanted.
And the boys,
my body wanted, and the boys wanted it. And then I woke up one morning and I wanted porridge. I'm not, even when I was vegan, I didn't really hit porridge too tough. Like, it wasn't like a craving, like a nostalgic craving. I was just like, I really need oats, and I caught myself being like, oh no, you can't have that. And then I was like, no, let's not do this. Listen, because the veganism, I was really quite ill, like physically and emotionally and mentally, and I was like, I can't let that happen. So I let myself. That language is wrong in itself, but I let myself have the porridge, and it just nourished me so much. Because there's an emotional side to eating as well. It's not just about the physical benefits. We hear about comfort eating as this bad thing, but I think comfort eating is very necessary if it's done with consciousness and awareness.
Or it's a signal. It's a signal that something's lacking, right?
Yes, exactly. But I let myself eat the porridge, and I put a picture on Instagram, and I got loads of messages.
Yeah.
Hey, I thought you were stronger than that, or I can't believe someone with your knowledge is eating that crap, or why are you eating it? I was like, because my body asked me for it, and I'm not gonna question my body's intelligence. I'm gonna listen to that intelligence and follow it.
There's a lot of oat haters out there.
Yeah, 100%.
There's been a lot of oats on my page recently, and not mine, on my feed. And we went to another thing that we're blessed with down here is the Nep Rewilding Estate. It's a massive regeneration project, about a half-hour drive away. And they're just loads of free foraging, Tamworth pigs, longhorn beef, and red and fallow venison. And it's a huge estate, and the main kind of purpose of it was to reintroduce a lot of herbs and wildflowers that had gone extinct locally. But to do that, obviously, part of regenerative farming is to have everything. So they've got the pigs and all the ruminants that do their organic work on the land, and then they kind of interfere as little as possible. But part of that process is that they cull the animals a few times a year. And they sell that, but they've just kind of expanded and opened a shop, and in their shop they've got naked oats, like locally grown oats that are just not processed. And I think seeing them there, it was just inspiration for, okay, this is something I can learn to cook with. I can find it's a really beautiful book that I'm reading right now about traditional country kitchen. The really old book. I got it from my nan. And every recipe has got a story. So there's one recipe, a lamb recipe that comes from an old festival that used to take place in a Sussex village every year. And this was the traditional, feast at the end. They had a ram that they split between everyone. And that, right, like those stories that I think a lot of us are missing from our, ancestors. We're not living like family centered anymore. So my nan wasn't telling me those stories when I was growing up, but luckily she had a book that I can now read as an adult. And that in itself is like really healing. Like, oh, I'm so lucky to still be here where I grew up. And the place that I grew up has got all of this connection to, the South Downs grazing animals and all of that. And so it feeds itself, cooking is quite therapeutic for me as well. The whole process of, finding a recipe or finding an ingredient, shopping, so therapeutic. But it builds, and that's also sort of like a return to the sanctity of motherhood and being a wife, and letting go of putting the word just in front of it, which is something that I do on autopilot sometimes. But that's a whole day's work, seeing these seeing a new recipe, seeing a new ingredient, thinking how can I, incorporate this, and rather than getting caught up in like a Dave Asprey post of, but that's high GI and no, actually, I want to eat things that have been grown in the soil I walk on. And I'm really fortunate to be able to do that because of where we have chosen to settle. So I'm going to follow that. Yeah. And that's when, extreme benefits to a lot of people that I follow that are very specific. I don't know if you follow Georgie's Gardens, very biologically scientific based. He talks a lot about UV levels and, eating by a window and getting sunlight first thing in the morning, all great stuff. But from my experience of being vegan, can become a bit of a mental illness for my personality. That's what I've learned. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's incredible, and it serves its purpose. But yeah, I found this really beautiful way to kind of hit all the holistic spots of what do I enjoy doing, what's accessible to me, what's realistic, what's within my range of budget and time and palate. So the reason that Eddie eats a lot more meat than me is because I just don't like eating a lot of meat. I just really like
fats.
Different. I love fat and bone broth. Butter, so much butter. There's also that difference between man and woman, and I've been pregnant and breastfeeding back to back for the last 5 years, and going with the changes of that, and it has felt like collagen, fat, making milk, growing, birthing, shrinking back again. It kind of feels like all my body's wanted is the micronutrients that's in fruit and vegetables, and the spices to rewarm the body after the big output of birth. And child rearing, and that's been different. You've been smashing weights, and your metabolism is entirely different, and and that's how we've sort of worked, and now it's come together. When him and the boys were just eating steak and fruit off the boards, I was a bit lost and ate a lot of pasta and just lived off of toast for a long time. But yeah, I'm finding my way to bringing it all together, and it's really exciting at the minute, really therapeutic.
Going back to the kids, how do you navigate the external forces that that kids are kind of exposed to, friends and sugar and
Nanny's house
and Nanny's house, grandparents and
hands off.
Million.
So we've tried a few approaches. We've tried hands-on, we've tried limitations, we've tried controlling, and it just creates stress in our experience for us and for our children. So what we do is we have our children a lot. So our children go to nursery just twice a week, and outside of that, they may go to their nannies once a week. So I would say 80% of our children's lives are spent with one of us. We're lucky in that way, because a lot of parents don't have that because their children go 5 days a week, or they have nannies and grandparents who are able to take them on more. So we trust in the education and the connection that we have with our children, and the understanding that they learn through observing us and our eating habits. So we serve our children by serving ourselves, right? So if they can witness how we are eating, then they're going to learn about food in a healthy way. Because what I don't want to, we're very conscious of not creating any food disorders with our children. I want them to view certain foods as bad or wrong. I want them to have an understanding of what's good for them and what's bad for them, but have the authority to decide if they want to have something that's bad for them. They can have that, but they understand that it's bad for them.
Okay.
It's just letting them climb and fall, and so they're both love climbing. We've always let them just fall over, and I was never really down for that. Eddie was like, "Well, I'll be all right." I'm like, "It's really high." He's like, "He'll only do it once," and they're so body aware, and they've got that through just being able to go, "Okay, you want to climb that thing?" I wouldn't do it, but something I always say to them, if Mars ever asks me, can I climb on this? Can I do this? Can you help me? My response is always listen to your body, slow down, how it feels. If you don't feel safe, I'm here to help you, but if you want to try, just take your time and keep checking in with how you feel. And that's the philosophy that I want them to try and have with food is, it's here. I'm not going to say no as much as I would if I was full on controlling this hands-on. You want sweets? Okay, you know.
But the thing is, when we give them sweets, it doesn't even finish them.
Yeah. I'll try and say, if I try and put a limit on something, it's just stress. It actually doesn't, the eating of the thing doesn't really come into it. It just becomes a power struggle between me and them. If there's just like, here's all the stuff, you know, like here's a big bag of sweets, or the cupboard that has crisps in it, they can go in there. They already self-regulate, and sometimes they don't, and I get, you know, oh, have I done something wrong? Am I harming them by not controlling this? But working it out, it changes all the time. You know, my feelings change, their feelings change. I might feel like it's more beneficial to our bond in a moment to actually say, I'm gonna move this away, and we're gonna have something else first. Then you want to come back to this. Other days, I feel like it's better for them to feel like they've made that decision. I'm gonna eat an ice cream before I eat.
We do it when we take
lunch or whatever.
If we go to go out for lunch and there's the ice cream thing, they just have the ice cream first.
I did it yesterday. Yeah.
It just makes everything easier. They're gonna get ice cream at some point, right? Ice cream's happening, right? They're gonna get ice cream. They've seen the ice cream. They want the ice cream now. We can either control it and not let them have that ice cream until they've had their dinner, or have a bit of a shit experience at dinner, or we can just say, have the ice cream. And then they'll have the ice cream. They won't even finish it. They'll have 2 or 3 bites of it. They've got what they wanted. Then the food comes, and then they eat their dinner.
You sound very confident. So does your confidence come from the fact that you yourselves are comfortable with the way you eat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I think again we are very action-based parents.
Okay.
Like if you want your kids to be strong, you better be strong.
Okay, I got you.
If you want your kids to be healthy, you better be healthy. If you want your kids to have positive relationships, you better have positive relationships in your life as well. And we take the same approach with food as well. So as long as they're seeing us, because if we restrict everything, and they go to nanny's house where there's no restrictions, they make themselves sick because they'll just eat all of the crap that they can eat. But because there is no restrictions, like it's not like mysterious. It's not forbidden.
Okay.
Right. If you make something forbidden, then it's going to become secretive. It's going to become they're going to get hold of this thing and they're going to eat it without you knowing, or they're going to rush and eat the packet before mum notices and takes it off. But when you take that away, they have more awareness over what they're doing.
They get to learn that responsibility. It's kind of like the same thing with screens, you know. TV as you want, and then we can have a discussion about how you feel, and I'm not going to put any judgment or shame on that, but I'm going to help them realise, you know, maybe your eyes feel funny or you're tired, you know, this is not something we've experienced, but just trying to help them rather than, it's such a hard place to land this battle of surrender as a parent, you know, which I'm sure you've got so much experience in as well. I could impart so much on them, but I know that's not how they learn. They learn from feeling it, from falling off the tree that was too high to climb. But I don't want to instill doubt in them by saying you can't do it, because there's also always the chance they will do something, and then we both get to learn about their capabilities. But with the food, it's I'm trying for there to be as much room for understanding and their own experiences. You know, I went through the thing with veganism where, looking back, I was eating very unhealthily, you know, in my approach to it mentally. Which maybe if I'd have grown up with more freedom and understanding around food. I grew up in a house of like Weight Watchers and Slimming World, and fat's bad and cardio is good and don't lift weights. When I started lifting weights, everyone was freaking out, like, you're going to look like Dana Lynn Bailey, and I really wanted to look like her. I had the haircut and everything. I was like so down for that. But yeah, rather than just being like, oh, just do what you want and see how it goes. And it is scary to do that as a parent, but I fall back on, I think, going back to what you said about confidence, I just fall back on this grounded knowing that we could all be wrong. From veganism, I learned that I was like going to be vegan for life, and this is it. I'm perfect. I'm the most spiritual I'm ever going to be. Like, this is the route to success. And then, it was a, you know, dark night of the soul and a total crushing of identity and a rebirth. And I was like, I don't think I'll ever be that sure of myself again, because being that sure is actually quite exhausting. parent, I'm glad that I went through that transition before having children, because now I can be like, oh, do you know what? They're going to feel different in 2 days. They might want to eat a whole bag of, whatever it is today that's going to stress me out, and they'll get over it. I survived no B12 for 5 years.
Yeah,
here I am.
Yeah,
they're resilient. They're stronger.
right. I like that. So there's another approach that I've heard of, which is because kids are exposed to lots of external forces, that what parents should do is make their home like a haven. So make it the place where they eat healthy food, because in the outside world, they're going to be exposed to, all of the ultra processed foods and ultra processed food snacks and sugars and all of this. But yeah, no, I like your thinking about it as well. I mean, we try our best to make the home a haven, because when she goes to school or to friends' houses, she's going to be exposed to all sorts. But yeah, I mean, in the morning she joins me with my steak and egg breakfast or my mince breakfast. So I feel like I'm building some sort of a foundation for her, and like an awareness that is good quality food. So if she does go off the rails in the future, maybe there'll be like a small kind of hook that will kind of bring her back to that food.
And it will, because I grew up with home cooked foods. I grew up with two parents that cooked. Two parents that will cook a chicken and boil up the bones. That was just normal, right? And looking back now, it has instilled something in me about whole foods and about the respect of food and the love for food and the relationship with food. So I'm living proof of that because of the way I was raised. And I agree with you with the haven. This is what we do. We make our home like the safest space for them, safest space for them to express themselves and to understand and to learn and to see us in all our glory. Making sure that they see our loving relationship, making sure they see us cooking, they see us training and exercising, see us turning off the TV and putting music on and dancing. They see us reading and whatnot. Because I think, we all know that they learn through the actions, not the words.
I love that. Okay, and connected to that, like, how do you guys deal with budgeting when it comes to kind of food? And
sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Our biggest outgoing is food.
I would say that, yeah. So it's like I was saying, how do I start crafting a meal? It's like, this is the animal that's going to be the base of the meal. How do I build everything around it? We look at everything. We're like, okay, well, this is what we want to eat. This is what we want to spend on food. So all the other things that we may or may not do will be decided after that.
And the budgeting is just all in the planning. So if we don't plan,
it's chaos.
It's chaos. I'll spend £350 in a week on food. When we budget, we can get a week's shopping for like 180. 200 sometimes. That's the budget we kind of got to work with. But we buy a lot of high quality meat. But if money is tight, we won't get it from the farm. We'll go to Sainsbury's. Right. So we are. So another thing, kind of ethos that I live by is practical and adaptable. Right. Because I spent a long time.
Very hard to get down with it once. I was like very organic, everything, like optimum, biodynamic, this, that, and the other. It's not sustainable all the time. And again, it becomes a stress. Yeah. It's so freeing being able to go, and eat something that's not ideal in my world of perfectionism and survive afterwards. And also start to understand, the more things that come into it, how I feel when I eat it, how I'm breathing when I'm eating, as to how I'm going to digest and process and be able to use that, how much sunlight, how much air I've had, fresh air. So it's another kind of dance, like with finding a new ingredient to cook with, like what we're going to spend, how we're going to make it as nourishing as possible for all of us.
It's about not being righteous about it as well.
And not getting bored.
We were quite righteous about always eating organic and everything perfect, and we just kind of being a little bit less righteous with it.
So you've kind of covered this already, but how has eating more meat improved your moods, improved your emotions? Not wanting to sell it too much, but how has it potentially improved your relationship?
Well, it's
I'll let you do this one.
there's a lot. It's improved my health on all aspects, so mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Start physically, I built my body back up. My body was so weak. I kept on getting injured. I had no strength. I had no mojo. Right? Not just in a sense of sex drive. My sex drive was down as well, but I had no mojo for life. I had no. I felt emasculated.
Okay.
There was not much of spark going on for. If you think about the reasons for a lot of people walking away from the 9-to-5 rat race, we were sort of like living the dream. You know, we'd found our soulmate. We were living our dream life, working together, our dream job, and it was all just a bit long.
Yeah.
For you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I was not in a good place.
There was no joy. It was like you're doing all these, walked away from all these things that weren't bringing us joy to bring the joy into life, but still, it's just a little bit like grey and hazy around you, like.
Yeah. So then, starting to eat meat, started to build my body up, get stronger. I could get back in the gym. I felt like a man again. I felt manly because I was lifting weights. I felt grounded. I felt grounded in my animal body. I'd been so esoteric and, vegan for years, doing lots of yoga and fasting and plant ceremonies and all these things. I was really up there, and eating the meat brought me down and helped to ground me, which then helped me in my business because my business was so floaty. I was just like, just manifest everything. It's like, no, like you need some real direct action as well. So I felt like a surge of masculinity. I felt manly again. I felt strong. Emotionally, I was just more emotionally stable, and I felt grounded in my spirituality as well. Then started to connect to my roots, my spiritual roots. I've been on a journey of following someone else's roots, right? My journey also started with Buddhism and Taoism. For the first 10 years of my spiritual journey, I was into the Eastern philosophies, Taoism, Buddhism. And then I came into yoga and came more into sort of Hindu, Tantra traits, Hindu practices, which led me into Tantra, which brought us to Ecuador, and then the tantric philosophy and way of life, especially red line Tantra, where it's an experiential experience instead of a devoted experience. You follow a guru, you follow your own intuition, have your own experiences. That gave me permission to be able to do all these things that had been kind of cast into this dark area, don't do these things, me.
It's do it and find out rather than
do it and find out how you feel.
Opposite of erring on the side of caution, do all the stuff that is a risk and then see if you're all right afterwards.
Yeah. So I felt a lot more grounded in my spiritual body as well, and then my mojo came back. I had the zest for life again. My sex drive came back. I had more direction. I had more focus. I had no focus before. None at all. It was all over the place. I was just going from one place to the other without even realizing. So, the effects of coming back into eating meat were huge, and I'm still feeling them now. It took a long time. I've now been eating meat for nearly as long as I was vegan. How long has it been? Maybe 4 years? 3 years?
A really long time, I think.
Before Mars was born.
Yeah.
So it must have been nearly 4 years now. And I'm still healing. There's still aspects that are still healing from those years of veganism. And there were a few things that were instant, like the fog. That was instant lifting. But there are a few things that took a year or two to have that knock-on effect. But the change is immense. And when I look back at a photo of me when I was vegan, I don't know who I'm looking at. And I look ill. I don't know. How did I not know? How did my family not know? Because it was came on so gradually. We could see it. But when you look back at the picture, I don't look good. So the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in how I look. The proof is in my skin. It's in my muscle tone. It's in my strength. It's in my stamina. It's in my direction. It's in my concentration. The proof is just in, pick a pudding, man. I've got so many puddings.
It's funny because when I was vegan, so I used to bodybuild, used to weight train, like when I was much younger, got quite big, and then I discovered veganism. And I discovered veganism because it seems to be that every time I discover a new way of eating, it's revolves around someone in my family being ill, particularly women, actually. So my grandmother, she was ill. She had cancer, breast cancer, and that kind of pushed me to get into veganism. So I got into veganism, and I got very, very thin, very kind of very. I remember I hadn't seen a friend for like a couple of years, and the first time he saw me, like he burst into, like he just was just laughing so much, so hard. He was like, "You," he said, "You look like a little boy," and I was like, "Oh wow, okay." And it kind of like recently I've been rethinking about that moment. I was kind of slight, I was skinny, and I was very fragile.
Yeah.
But you kind of excuse that state. You kind of say, "Oh, I'm becoming more peaceful and more gentle," and rather than wanting to kind of be robust and be strong. And that's what I'm thinking. Like now that I'm in my kind of my mid-40s now, I'm like, I want to be robust. I want to be strong. I want to be fit. And like bringing this around to discovering meat-based or eating more meat. It was my mother's Alzheimer's that kind of pushed me into this area. And I've done some research, looked into it, kind of looked at her diet and what she used to eat. Heavy grains, heavy sugars, lots of stress in her life as well. But now that I'm eating more meat, I'm like focused on being more robust because I don't want to get to her age and be fragile. I want to be as robust and strong as possible. But kind of linked to that, all of these women in my life kind of somehow influencing the way I eat. Jess, what is your take on societal pressures or conforming pressures, or when you've spoken to your friend circle about eating more meat and it not being an issue for their femininity or their female energy? Like, how do you navigate that? How do you discuss these things?
I think I also kind of I take things on, like I was saying, my journey into veganism. Overnight it was like, this is me. I find it quite easy to follow, or have done with health and food. It was similar with bodybuilding. That's a bit of a thing that's only just now starting to be seen as more feminine. And it was similar. A lot of my friends were vegan, and it was a bit like, oh, how could you do that to the animals? And and my kind of point was, how could we can't keep doing this to ourselves. Especially we're all looking to have children. And I was always lucky, with my menstrual cycle. Was as soon as it came, it was very regular. Veganism actually really helped with, it was the first kind of, it was my argument for healthy periods and less painful periods. And then when I started to crave eggs, I suppose being like menstrual cycle hormonally led is what helped me to be very to trust more in it. And so when I was having those conversations with friends, it was like, this is a very feminine matter. You've got hormones, you need the fats, you need the nourishment. And luckily that they were quite in tune and intuitive as well. And for me to be able to say, it's just my body is telling me I'm bleeding, I'm ovulating, I want to eat eggs. That craving then moved on to craving fish. That was the first meat that I ate, the first animal that I ate after years of not being vegan. And it felt like more, the very specific experience that I had was I felt like my eyes got juicier as I was eating the salmon. I was like, I phoned Eddie, I was like, I can see better. Like, I've just eaten this fish and I feel like, I don't know if you've ever seen SpongeBob when he comes out of the water and he gets all dry. I realised like that was me getting put back in the water, and that's what kind of fat-based for me feels like. And I think something that's been really lovely is the first 40 days book. A lot of information about nourishing through pregnancy and postpartum, and being able to experience, although having really hard births that needed a lot of recovery from, having so much milk for my babies. I feel like you were talking about proof in the pudding. Like, I think the only way I kind of survived that was fat, was butter, broth, beef fat. Yeah, drinking placenta smoothie. It was going back to that real core essence of like, what am I made of? What have I just output a lot of by making a whole being of tissue and blood, and putting that back in? It's been really reassuring.
That's interesting. Have you had any fallouts with any of your vegan friends? And if you have you been able to kind of get them? Have they done a U-turn and started eating meat now?
Now, 4 years later, most of my vegan friends are not vegan now. I fell out with quite a few friends. Well, they fell out with me. Some we haven't reconciled.
Okay.
It's quite tough. It's really sad.
Dear friend, I can't remember what it's like you were describing about the old school Facebook war personalities that we get into. Is I think I made a post about something or reposted something about fat being nourishing. A friend, a really close friend of mine at the time, sent loads of like pictures of factory farms and was like, I can't believe as a mother you're supporting animals being taken away from their mums to get milk. And it was just like a lot of projection all at once, and it was really painful because I don't know if this is the right thing, but this is where I'm going now, same as when I went vegan. And yeah, there was a lot of backlash for it, but those that matter don't mind, and the ones that mind don't matter. Dr. Zeus.
Yeah.
To hold on to in this journey.
On the flip side as well, we almost gave permission to a lot of our friends to come away from veganism as well. If Eddie and Jess, like Eddie, who's the vegan plant-based man who has the restaurant, if he's not doing it, like about 3 of your friends, as soon as we started eating meat, next day they're on bacon sandwiches. Yeah. They've been vegan for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, some of my friends went vegan with me. So my friend that I started going to the gym with went vegan with me, and then and she was just so happy when like it was like, we're not vegan anymore. And I was like, you're free, but
they were waiting for someone to take the lead.
Humans being humans.
Again, and that's people trapped within those brackets. And then when someone who kind of influences them in some way goes against the grain, they can go, oh, I can finally go against the grain as well.
For me, it was Origins Nutrition. I actually can't remember his name, but it was
So
I was studying nutrition, and I did naturopathic nutrition with the College of Naturopathic Medicine, and found some really good links through that. That was part of the identity breakdown when I started to learn about, how we metabolize things, and that actually veganism isn't always optimum. I was like, verging on mental breakdown from that. It was too threatening. Followed Origins because he had some really good posts, and then it was all very like carnivore propaganda, and I was like, this is outrageous, but I couldn't stop following it. I did stop following it for a while, and when those egg and fish cravings were really strong in me, I kind of went back and I was like, no, this guy looks very healthy, and that's a lot of scientific stuff that he's kind of posting about, and maybe it isn't as unsafe as I think. Actually having animals in my diet again.
And how about family? Has there been any kind of resistance amongst family? Do they view you in a kind of, Eddie and Jess, like they've switched over and all of this? Or and to add to that, one more thing: is there anybody in the family that you feel could benefit from the way in which you are eating that you've struggled to kind of convince?
So my family are a bit more open and relaxed. They went through the whole veganism thing with me, and they kind of just supported it. Much like you, I had as I was going into my vegan transition, kind of transitioning into that and being more awareness of that, my mum got very ill, and then so we were reducing her meat consumption, and we were up in certain plants, and it helped her tremendously overcome a very serious illness. So that kind of validated that for me as well. And then mum and dad went on a journey of eating less meat. They didn't go vegan, but they just ate less meat and just more vegetables, and they felt better, and they probably had that initial cleanse that you get when you start doing that, but they didn't subscribe themselves to it. And then when I started eating meat again, they was like, oh, okay, Like, it wasn't really an issue. Some of them friends, actually, I remember being at a dinner party and one of their friends were like, "Oh, I heard you're not vegan anymore." And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "So you were wrong?" And I was like, "Well, no, because at the time I was right. At that time it was right, because if I don't regret, the whole vegan thing was amazing. Like, it changed my life completely. And if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be here now. So I don't think there is a right and wrong. But incidentally, my dad went keto about 2 years, and he's not strict keto now.
So
That's
great.
so funny. But they're not strict keto now, but they are keto based. They lean into keto. If they've overdone something, they can go back into their keto. But Dad lost like 4 stone in 2 months or something. He was like 18 stone, and I was seeing him, and I was like, who's this guy?
Yeah, it was.
Where's Dad? Like, the collar was all loose, his shirt was all baggy. I was like, what's going on? He's like, oh, I'm doing this keto thing. So, like, they have awareness. My mum grew up in a house where there was always, a lard on the side and bones in the on the stove. So they're very food orientated. So for me personally, yeah, they helped. Dad could definitely benefit from it, and he has. He went and did it. I think he could do it more.
And he's
probably
still got that in him. You see him being like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I've been eating too much bread,"
Yeah, the awareness. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But your family's slightly different.
If it's not on an NHS guideline somewhere, they don't want to subscribe to it, really. Although saying that, my dad is quite traditional and primal in the way that he eats, and he's always been very. When I was vegan, and preachy, we never really butted heads, because my main thing was, if you couldn't kill it, I was like, I can't kill animals, so I'm not going to eat them, and he was like, have done, would do it again, actually loved the idea of hunting and catching my own food, and I was just like, okay, cool, fair enough. And that obviously is very much aligned with where I'm at now. So he has always been like quite meat based in his own way. He will eat a whole tub of ice cream if he feels like it, but that's kind of where I'm at as well. Intuitive, and because of the generation that he's from, he's always been like, he's never been down with margarine or anything like that. But then my mum, the women in my family, are still recovering from the demonization of fat, and it's something that I get very, I insert myself in the middle of it and try and be the fixer, and then I have to kind of pull away. My mum does have real butter in her fridge now, which is like a tiny bit. She says that it's there for me, but then we were talking the other day, and she said, "Oh, I had some of that bread that you told me about with real butter." I was like, "Yeah." So it's just small little wins like that. They weren't really down with the vegan thing, and actually, my stepdad was he's always a lot more. What would she call it? He was more experimental with his eating, and liked things that were whole food and interesting. He'd eat steak tartare, just that kind of a different palate. My family was very much like lean meat, fat-free this, a lot of frozen food, there was an interesting mix of like, we always sat around the table together and my mum cooked, but it might be like a dolmio jar, but like extra lean food. So a mix of the traditional way that my mum's mum grew up cooking. She was like nose to tail kind of generation and vibe. But yeah, it's just the change in the kind of propaganda of food that got them, and the processed stuff being convenient and then marketed to like make you slim. The women in my family slim. They don't want to be healthy. They want to be. Yeah. They want to look good. It doesn't matter how they feel. But yeah, so mum's eating butter. Anyway, back to my stepdad. He's always been different in the way that he eats, and he got diagnosed with kidney disease about 5 years ago, and actually went to a naturopathic nutritionist that I recommended, which was a big change for him at the time, but he cut out dairy and gluten, so the cutting out of gluten was great, but now he's still kind of on the Oatly flex, and I'm trying to really gently be like, it might be worth looking into something that hasn't got oils in it, and like there's a lot of seed oils in that diet, because again, thing from my mum about I can't touch fat or I'll be fat, but like the irony is that she doesn't look how she wants to, and there's always years this kind of dialogue between my mum and my sister of like, well, you're lucky, you're skinny, which is like actually offensive because I don't ever want to be skinny, I want to be hench.
Yeah.
But it's always been like, I just eat real food, and a lot of it, when I was vegan, it was the same. And with the animals coming back into my diet, I've always said to them, like, actually, us women, we need fat. You need lots of fat. Like, start with real butter, have that, fill up on fat, and then you won't want all of this sugar-filled stuff that's making you inflamed, that's giving you bad period pains, that's messing up your digestion, anxiety, you know. My sister actually eats, her diet is that she just eats a whole chicken every day. She eats, she cooks a chicken every day. She doesn't broth the bones, but she's very into bodybuilding and protein, and so she
smashes chicken.
Just smashes chicken, and so that's quite cool. I think there's other things in there.
But she's scared of steak. She wouldn't smash steak.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's still scary. Got to be lean. Everything's got to be lean. There's still a big fear, and I suppose my dream for my family, the women in my family, is that they all eat fat and live happily ever after.
Same. Like, as I said, like all of the reasons for getting into different food stuff has been the women in my family, and now I'm noticing that there's a hell of a lot of there's a lack of fat in their diet, a lack of fat, a lack of red meat, you know, too much rice. You know, culturally we eat a lot of rice. I used to eat rice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like actually, funny story. Like Frankie grew up in the countryside, so she never had hay fever until she met me, and we've kind of like figured out that it's probably the amount of rice that I was giving her, like probably did something to her gut, you know, that made her develop hay fever. And I'd had hay fever since I was a kid, and rice was predominantly my diet. But yeah, going back to something you said, Eddie, about someone saying to you that you're wrong. That's something that's kind of like over my head quite often, is that I was quite passionate about veganism, and even though it was a long time ago, it's like something that I think my family sometimes bring up quite a bit, like, oh, you know, you were big into veganism and now you've gone, you know, all meat based. And the way I kind of see it is the veganism was a counter to the standard diet, the standard unhealthy diet. So it's not that veganism essentially was wrong. It was like a reaction to the fact that the diet that I was eating, or the diet that most people were eating, was not healthy or clean. And I just view like meat based almost as a continuation of that, of trying to find something that is, for want of a better word, optimal. You know, something that makes us thrive. You know, so yeah, like. Do you have like other arguments for, you know, when people are like, oh, but you used to be plant-based, like why are you like now?
Because we're designed to grow, right? If I was thinking the same as I was when I was 18, I wouldn't be in a good place, right? And like life is here to experience. The thing is, some of us, depending on your design or like what you've been put here to do, some of us, and I think you're in the same camp as me, are designed to come into life and push into extremes. Because then when we come back and we swing the pendulum back into the middle, we've now collected all the information from this extreme and this extreme, and we've come back into the middle, so someone else who's not prepared to go to the extremes doesn't have to go to that extreme anymore, right? Because some people aren't built to do that. Some people are built to stay somewhere here in the middle, just swaying like this. I'm like this. So I've gone from like full-blown drug addict to full-blown sober. I've gone from vegan to carnivore. I've gone from bodybuilding to yoga. I'm constantly doing that pendulum swing. It's in my nature. It's in my character. And if it wasn't for people like us, we wouldn't know what the boundaries are. We wouldn't have perspective of both sides. So if anyone says I failed or I went back on what I learned, it's like a lot of people saying, "Oh, you've gone back to eating meat." I was like, no, I've moved forward into eating meat. Because I now don't eat Tesco's essential chicken breasts. I now eat grass-fed steak. There's a different form of consciousness around the food that I'm eating that I got through going through veganism. Veganism was the segue, right? And if we get trapped in an ideology or trapped within this or a philosophy, it could become very detrimental to us as we change with the seasons, the years, and the seasons of our life as well. So I just try to bring awareness to that when people say, you know, you've gone back to eating or you failed. It's like, no, I'm moving forward. There's no going back here. It's a like you say, this is a continuation of that. Because I think everyone who went into veganism, like you said, was seeking something. It's like the way we're eating is not good. So the veganism almost just rebooted the whole system. You know, we threw everything out the window, went down this plant-based thing. We've rebooted the system. We've got the awareness. We've got rid of the toxins and the fog that was causing. Because my diet before veganism was not great. I was eating a lot of cheap meat. I was bodybuilding, so I was buying protein shakes, chicken breast, broccoli, rice, like in large amounts. So I went through a huge detoxification process. I'm not just in my body, but in my mind as well. So I got a lot of clarity in the first 2 years of veganism, pure clarity. Then fog came on. But if I noticed that and I hadn't identified with veganism and I stopped being vegan at year 2, man, if I went meat-based then, it would have been a different story. I wouldn't have had to rectify all of these sort of conditions or illnesses that I've got over the years of continuing to try to be vegan.
Let's say somebody wants to change their diet, or let's say there's a couple out there, you know, that are where you guys were about five years ago. Yeah, that's when you kind of changed. Yeah. What advice would you give them in terms of, like, you know, habit changing, in terms of their diet, and, you know, what they should look to and what signs, you know, they should kind of look out for?
I think how they feel. Like, for a woman, if you're already in tune with your menstrual cycle, you probably will know the cravings around ovulation, and then the first week before your bleed. You can learn a lot there. You've got heightened intuition, especially when you're actually bleeding as well. What you feel like eating, you know, according to what week of the month it is. It's just a really nice, because hormones run the show, you know, for everybody, but like men's hormone cycles are 24 hours, so it's easier for you to kind of just find what works for you and keep doing that. But it might be a bit of a longer process for women, but you can't really go wrong if you've got that clarity with, oh, I know that you know, eating more meat the week that I am bleeding actually feels good. And that might not be true for everybody, but I think that's a really nice place to start.
And what about interpreting those cravings? So some people will get cravings for foods that aren't particularly healthy. So is it that they have to interpret that craving in a different way, or do they just go with it?
I think that's a part of the process. That's a really, when you can just, for me, I had a lot, I think it took me longer because I still had this kind of good versus bad food idea in my head. Might have been quicker to just let myself eat certain things and not kind of restrict myself, and learn quicker that sometimes eating 5 chocolate digestives feels really good up here, and I can deal with if it doesn't feel good in my body. But 9 times out of 10, what I'm realizing, if something feels good, like that idea of comfort food, I think especially in my situation is like postpartum and now pregnant, so it needs to feel like easy and kind of like a hug for the inside, and know that we're resilient and we can deal with that. Like, if you have got that foundation of cooking everything, knowing where it's kind of coming from, having a connection to the lands that you're on, or the lands that you came from if you're not living on the lands that you're on, and understanding how you might be someone that needs more fat, and starting there, or you might be someone that needs more protein, or someone that needs more carbs, and starting there. I found out through eating a lot of meat when Eddie was, that it actually didn't feel good. It felt great for a while because I hadn't eaten meat for years and I was really depleted in, you know, iron and B12 and fat in general. Actually, what feels really, really good for me is cooking a lot of vegetables in a lot of fat and broth. So like hydrating that way through fatty broth. And getting the textures and the diversity for my gut from vegetables that as much as possible come from the soil that I'm walking on. The hay fever, what you said about Frankie's hay fever was really interesting. I always came from a snotty family, like, oh, that's just how we are, you know, we've got rubbish pipes. And one winter, I think it was, or springtime, of having local honey every day, and I've never had never had hay fever since. It was just getting my system aligned with the environment and the pollen and what was going on at the time. Just banished that thing that I thought I was going to have forever. I was taking steroids when I was at school for hay fever and asthma, and I don't have that. And luckily, that's not through meticulous control of lots of different things. It's just this general awareness that, okay, just stay in line with what's going on, what's seasonal, and what feels good. And if I have a craving that, you know, that I go with, and it turns out to actually make me feel gross, I just will look for something else next time. You know, if I'm sugar, maybe I'm actually thirsty, or I haven't slept enough, or salt. I need more carbs or some salt. Yeah, putting salt in our water has been life-changing.
I think a big part of it as well is just experimenting. People, unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to sort of do the work. Again, they don't want to swing the pendulum. They kind of want to just be told this is the thing, or this is the one diet. And from my understanding, there is no one diet. It changed. The way I eat in the summer is different from how I eat in the winter. The way I eat when I'm training is different from when I'm not training. The way I eat when I'm tired is different when I've got loads of energy, right? So confining yourself to one way of eating can be detrimental. It might work for a bit, but then when it stops working, what do you do? So my advice to everyone is to experiment. Do carnivore for a month, see how you feel. Do keto for a month, see how you feel. Okay, eat processed foods for a whole month, see how you feel.
Oh, I had such a good time breaking away from that idea that everything had to be organic and non-processed, and like eating loads of McDonald's because I hadn't done it for ages. And I remember always wanting to pass my driving test so I could go to the drive-through. And then I was vegan, you know, for the first 5 years of having a car, and never did that. And the first time I went to the drive-through was like, whoa! And then I did it like 4 times in that month, and I was like, oh, I feel horrible now. But I got something really nostalgic and great out of that mentally. And I learned that, you know, actually a lot of the propaganda that told me I can't, you know, this stuff is so bad for me, I can't possibly tolerate it, it's going to make me ill. It's like, I'm actually okay. Understanding that it's about long term, not having a diet based on all that stuff. It's the very fine line. But, you know, I think a lot of us don't feel safe in the sovereignty of that and having that responsibility. A lot of us went to school. Most of us went to school where it wasn't safe to find out for yourself. It was, you sit down and this is the answer.
Get told, yeah.
And if you don't know the answer, if you don't work it out in this way, then you are wrong and you are bad and you're not going to succeed. And again, the pendulum has got to swing all the way. And then we find ourselves kind of landing back somewhere where, okay, no, it's safe to explore my cravings and eat a bit more vegan. Another gift of doing that diet. I didn't eat most of the stuff that I eat now until I went vegan. My plant-based, you know, I didn't really eat any plants. I just ate cheese, bread and chicken and bacon. And I still eat those things, but with a lot of other stuff with it, and it's so good.
So Eddie said that 70 to 80% of his diet is kind of meat-based. So what percentage would you kind of, if you had to put a percentage on the amount of meat that you eat, what percentage would you say?
Maybe 40 to 50.
Okay.
Or maybe a bit more than that.
I'd say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Just above 50. Teetering over 50.
Yeah, because the thing is that I don't eat eggs. So part of the long-term thing that I got from being vegan, I've never had any allergies in my life. Conventional dairy used to, you know, make the asthma that I had a lot worse. Now that I'm like more animal-based, I don't have any problems with dairy. But yeah, I was eating eggs to come out of veganism, and then I just all of a sudden would get these really horrible reactions like cramps and really shakes sick. And sweats from eating eggs. And I noticed that it would happen if I'd eaten bread as well. So it started off as I could only have eggs if I wasn't going to eat bread around them. And gradually, it's just because I didn't start eating meat until maybe a year after I was eating eggs. My gut already had just like not been able to digest eggs anymore. And I made a conscious decision that I was going to keep bread in my diet, not eggs, because bread was what I ate more. And any, you know, new mum out there will kind of say it makes up most of your diet in the postpartum days. And that's something that I want to work towards. So yeah, so I kind of replaced that with like butter, fat, and then the vegetables, like carbs.
Is it something that you would consider going, like, is there an urge to want to eat eggs, or has the reaction been so...
No, I think about eggs all the time.
She hates it.
They're superfood,
Yeah.
you know. They're like, and our youngest doesn't eat them. Mars eats eggs with Eddie, but I'm really aware that, you know, that again they eat what we eat, and the boys never see me eat eggs, and so I'm aware that, and I don't want them to think that I've got my views on kind of allergies and things and tolerances, and I just, it's really important for them to know that they can handle anything. And so it's something with me that I'm looking forward to the day that I eat eggs again, because I know it's coming, it's just not right now.
Yeah. I had a chat with this doctor called Dr. Tony Hampton. He's a doctor based in Chicago, and he's done like a whole lot of kind of metabolic interventions with low carb and meat based. And he was talking about food intolerances, and how, you know, these can develop even if you're meat based or carnivore, and it's something to do. He was like, it's something to do with the fact that your microbiome, your guts get used to a certain way of eating or certain foods that you eat. So then you can become very sensitive if you then reintroduce other foods. But he was like, going 100% carnivore is kind of like it's an elimination diet. So if there is like an allergy or reaction to something, going like 100% carnivore and then reintroducing stuff back in may be a better approach for certain people to find out, you know, why they're having these reactions, or, you know, which foods trigger them. Because it may or may not be the eggs, it could be something else, but, you know.
It's definitely the bread. It's definitely the bread.
Oh, sorry, that's my battery. Hold on, wait 1 sec. Yeah, keep going. I'm just gonna...
Yeah, it's definitely the bread. It was just something that I was like, not ready to give up. And then again, that's an empowered decision. It's, you know, I know it would be so much better for me and quicker. And well, there's that dialogue that it might be better for me, but like in reality, it's with my lifestyle and my like responsibilities, it's much easier for me to put bread in the toaster. And
emotionally
like,
and mentally, it's better for you to eat bread. You know?
Right now, yeah. And that's like my more grounded, like my lived experience. I'd love to be very optimum and scientific about it and be one of those people who's like, no matter what, I'm going to have this, you know, the best thing. But I'm really happy to just take comfort in toast.
Yeah, that's understandable.
And I think that is the route to it one day. I do see myself going through a process where it is a lot more meat-based, then the eggs come back in, then other things come back in, and I've done a lot of bouts of being completely gluten-free, like on and off, mainly inspired by this desire to want to eat eggs. And it's just something that I've realised, actually, my capacity as a mum of pregnant mum of two toddlers, is like, eat the toast.
This is not the time. You know, there's a time to... there's a time to apply knowledge that's learned, and you don't have to apply knowledge that you learn straight away. And I think sometimes if you're constantly trying to apply the knowledge in the wrong season, the wrong cycle, you don't get the effect that you're supposed to get. And not everything needs to be implemented straight away. So we know that once new
if
baby's
we ever
born
stop
and
having babies,
when we stop having babies and Jess starts to get her body back, then we can really focus. But at the moment, she hasn't got pure autonomy over her body. She has another body inside of her right now, right? And she has 2 children that want her body constantly. So is now the time to be doing that stuff? Probably not. Now is probably the time to loosen the reins a bit, relax into it, and then tighten up the reins when we have a bit more, when you have more autonomy and more control over yourself and your life.
You know, timing and opportunity as well, and just local. It's like, it's so specific. There's some people where this situation might actually be the perfect time to go carnivore, and there's a lot of pregnant women that I've seen that, you know, eat a lot of liver, and some really cool, inspirational people. And it's like, I think that's also part of the mental power we need to take back in this age of social media. Like, again, lots can be true at once. This might be great for me, this is great, and it's working for this other person, and I'm gonna feel okay and feel safe doing my own thing. Like, yeah.
And kind of linked to that is, are there any foods that you used to almost like swear by back in your kind of vegan days that you do not touch at all, or have suspicion of?
Kale.
Leafy greens. I have no desire to eat. Like, we got kale the other day, and I was just like, no chance. Like, looking at it, it's like, I don't want that in my body. It doesn't look good, doesn't smell good. So like leafy greens. But I would have a bit of lettuce in a sandwich. That's interesting. But like the dense, like the chard, the kales, the spinach, don't touch them. Don't touch them. But then a big thing I've reduced is rice.
Yeah.
I eat rice now, once every 2 weeks, maybe? Twice.
So
we used to eat rice every day. Now it's probably like twice a month. And we soak it and we cook it proper, and always cook rice proper, but we soak it more now, soak it for longer, and just, I don't create. Only time I want it if I'm having, like, if we're making like maybe some Asian food, or then I'm like, okay, let's have some rice with this. But it's not something I'm drawn to anymore. And then what else? What else do we not eat anymore?
I think we do still eat nuts, but they're something
Very
that
rarely,
used to make up a big part of our diet, and now they're almost like a sweet. I'm like, ooh, have a handful of cashews. That's like a bag of crisps, or like
used to be a meal. We have a whole bag of cashews.
Like they used to make this bread out of like 6 cups of nuts and 12 eggs. It's a really good recipe, but I just like don't think I can eat that many nuts. And same with oats. It's basically a lot of the grains are not feeling good and not feeling like something that I want to eat. We have brown rice pasta, something that we kept from when I was gluten-free a couple of years ago. We were like, we like this, so we'll just always have that, trying to move away from wheat-based. Just trying to experiment with, again, like, can we find it in vegetables that are local, things that come from the soil, like trying to be kind of like in there with the soil and the energetics of like the land that we're in. Potatoes, smashed potatoes,
Oh, and seed oils, don't really touch seed oils at all anymore. They sneak in every now and then. We're not like militant with it, but we don't have them in our house. We don't cook with them. We try to avoid them when we're out, but again, we're not absolutely militant with it. But that's the biggest thing, is seed oils and leafy greens, just kind of gone from the diet pretty much.
Going back to nuts, so one of the so I've always had cramping issues, even before carnivore, even during veganism. Like, a lot of people say that you go carnivore, you eat more meat, you're prone to cramps and you need electrolytes and all of this. So one thing I've been doing recently is introducing macadamias, Brazil nuts, almonds, just a handful of them, and like almost eating them like, the way I see it is I'm trying to eat them like the way people have vitamin pills, just to see if that will help with the electrolytes, because I eat fruit, but my only concern with fruit is, or my concern at the moment, maybe it's not founded, is the amount of sugar. So at one point we were eating loads of avocados, but you can only eat so many avocados, and then you want to change things up, and then when you change things up, you then find yourself eating maybe too sweet of fruit. So I was like, okay, let me just kind of try some macadamias, try some Brazil nuts, try some almonds, and see. So at the moment I'm just experimenting with that, and so far haven't cramped. But why have you guys kind of reintroduced cashews and stuff? Is it just a taste thing, or is it a health thing, or a variety thing?
Variety, convenience. It's dense in nutrients. So you don't need much.
Like a quick hit of fat, the satisfaction of like crunching on something. Especially for the children. Mars loves cashews, so it's just something, if I'm in the middle of cooking something that's going to take 2 hours or whatever, and he wants something, nuts are very good.
It's about just bringing things back as well, like, again, like reintroducing stuff. I didn't eat nuts for a long time, so it's like, okay, what happens if I eat these nuts now?
And it feels good, and so that's the only test really. It's like, does it feel good? Then keep doing it.
And it might be
it changes.
like once, not that for me, I probably eat nuts twice a month or something. I might just have a handful of nuts.
I'll get these like sudden intense cravings for a handful of Brazil nuts or cashews normally. And we do eat peanut butter. We have that in the house. But I used to that was something when I was vegan, I ate a lot of that. When I was smashing toast, I'd eat a lot of that in the name of like, okay, I'm having a lot of sugar right now in this bread, and we try and mix it with something fatty and proteiny. Yeah. But yeah, it just kind of doesn't feel like it's something I want to eat all the time. And then it's nice when I do. It's like nuts have taken on this whole new breed of like comfort / luxury kind of treat that's not sickly or decadent or sweet. It's very nice, kind of just nice hit of fat, some juiciness, oily. Yeah.
Okay. And kind of last kind of question is, or observation is, you guys were quite health conscious, you know, before going meat based. You know, you were into fitness, into yoga, and along with kind of fitness and yoga, you have an awareness of, how do I say this? Kind of like doing things right and doing things formulaically, right? So I know, Eddie, like your background, like you were in your PT days, like early PT days, you were still kind of, you know, a little bit wayward, you know, you kind of like, taking drugs, and, you know, there was an interview that I listened to with this woman called Amber O'Hearn, and she had a whole heap of like psychological issues. I think she was bipolar. She had some psychotic issues, and she's like a really intelligent woman. So she was like, at the time, I knew all of these things were wrong, and I could analyze them intellectually and see why they were wrong and what I needed to implement. But it wasn't until she got into eating meat that the kind of the switch flicked. So even though she had the knowledge of what to do that was right, she couldn't implement it until she kind of changed her diet. Like, is there any of you that, or anything in you that kind of resonates with that, in the sense that you had all of this schooling, you had all of this knowledge about fitness and health and what to do right, and, you know, the life skills and the self-help, the kind of information that comes with it, but was diet potentially something that has made, because you're talking about feeling grounded, was diet that something that kind of has flicked a switch and made all of that stuff kind of fit at all?
Yeah, in both instances. So veganism helped me beat my addictions. So that change in diet, and I think what it was it wasn't the diet. It's, I think what she's touching on is the change, habit. Right? It's the change of habits, and you create you by changing the habit, you change a story, right? In your head, you change the story of who you are. 'Cause you're not doing the thing that you normally do. You're doing it differently. So that means that you are starting to write a different story, right? By creating a change. So veganism helped me find the discipline and the awareness and like the spiritual connection to get over my addiction. Without veganism, I don't feel I would have got over my addiction at that time. I might still have it now. I don't know. So yes, in a sense, creating change did help me create. Changing my diet helped me change other aspects of my life, and then the same thing again when I went meat-based as well. So going meat-based and feeling more grounded and more masculine in my body, and feeling like strength and feeling like spirit in my body, allowed me to be more confident in who I am and how I want to live my life and run my business and raise my children and the type of partner I want to be. So it was a huge catalyst, because again, it gave me that permission to change. If I can change this, then I can change that. Right? So it gives me that confirmation, that confidence. So yeah, for sure. But again, it happened in both instances. Veganism was a huge help, was a catalyst for a huge change in my life, and going back to meat was a huge catalyst for changing my life as well.
Jess, same for you, or different take?
Very similar. Very similar, yeah. I think there's a lot of power in that. It's an empowering process to, make new pathways. And I think with such like ethically loaded diets and lifestyle templates that we're dealing with, vegan, carnivore, it's a big self-development. For me personally, it wasn't kind of just as simple as what do I want to eat. There's everything else that came into it, and the knock-on effect of that has just been, like I was kind of saying earlier, the meat heals because it's like breaking out of that box of what you're told in school. Here's the formula for getting it right. It's like there is a formula for getting it right if you want to be really specific, which can be helpful. But ultimately, I think the embodiment of a very holistic approach is that being in the body, which I definitely think eating meat, for someone who was, doing a lot of movement and fitness, it's not until eating meat that I realised, like, I was not in this body at all, really. Like, scarily when I look back, it's just throwing weights around, and my body was changing and my muscles were responding. But the depth of the feeling and the connection that I have between mind, body, soul now, and the way that fat, like specifically fat, I know I keep saying butter, fat, broth, for me, is like some sort of liquid elixir of life that just connects, like lights up my pathways with my tissues, with my muscles, and yes, helps to kind of walk with a bit more courage in the reasons why I'm choosing things.
I love that. Love that. All right, guys, is there anything that you wanna add, to anybody that's kind of struggling with diet or struggling with, veganism and considering, changing, but, have a fear that, perhaps the nearest and dearest and their friends would have issues? Anything that any advice that you can give?
For anyone who's struggling with diet, I would just advise what I said before: just start experimenting, just do something, right? Take that first step. And it might not be the step. It doesn't matter if the step's in the right direction. All that matters is that you create momentum and you start to move in a direction. And as soon as you're moving, you can direct it whichever way you want to go. But what I see most people do, they're so wrapped up in the way they're eating, or they're so fearful of change, they don't even take one step. So my advice, if you're that person, just take a step. Just create one change in your diet, and then see what that change leads to. And then take another step and another step. And you might have to go around a few circles a few times, right, to find out what's right for you. But just take that step, make it, create a change. And then anyone who is vegan, who is suffering maybe with the identity, be selfish. It's your body, it's your life. Forget what anyone else is going to say. Be selfish. It's your body. It's your life. Look after yourself. That's my main message.
And Jess, anything you wanna
add? Similar kind of message to the being selfish, but in the sense of like just almost like let your hair down. If it is vegan, if it's ethical stuff that you're worried about, trust that there are nice people that love the world and love the land specifically, and they are very reverently caring for animals, and they are, there isn't a humane way to die. There's not a humane way to kill, but unfortunately, if that wasn't part of the circle of life, it wouldn't be happening. Go back into nature. Like, I was a big nature lover as a vegan, and found my initial connection to nature there through this warped love of animals, and the kind of monocropping that brought the tofu onto my plate would kill all the wildlife and the bugs and the bees that we so badly need. And while that's valid and the specifics of it is something, again, you can get into, chill out. It's not, we can't heat. If we try and heat up the entire ocean, we will lose all of our body heat and we perish. So like, kind of just get more focused on your immediate surroundings, what's local to you, what's right to you, what's your heritage, what would your ancestors have been eating, and how can you get, without ruining your mental health or your financial health, how can you get as close to that optimum and keep all of it healthy, like the biosphere? What's best for everybody and everything in a calm way. Don't take too much on. I was very I do lean in a lot into perfectionism and like wanting optimum and kind of wanting to save the world in one. And I've realised like I can't take all that on. I'm one person, and food's meant to be joyful. You know, the kitchen's the heart of the household, and you know, if you are doing more traditional roles, like that is lovely, and that is not something to feel like a kind of cop out about. You can give it a whole new life of its own, and it can be so healing and nourishing, way beyond what's going on in your cells and tissues. So yeah,
awesome.
Go for it.
Awesome. Guys, this has been wicked, man. Like, knocking on 2 hours now. So, yeah.
I love it.
What's the rest of your day like? What have you guys got on?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the gym.
I'm going counselling.
Okay.
Pick up the children.
Day off today.
Yeah, day off together. First day off together in ages.
Yeah.
So we're just going to like...
hang out for a bit.
Yeah.
Get some training.
All right, let me...
Yeah. And go get the babies. Go get raw milk. It's Wednesday's raw milk day.
All right, let me not take up too much more of your time. I want to say thank you for this.
This has been great. Thanks so much for inviting us.
Any actually, one more question. Any ideas for this? I'll give you a little background on the project is to kind of make people less scared of meat and to make them see the potential for it to heal them. And the aim initially was to kind of, well, it still is, to make this into like an audio podcast. So like something that you can listen to that isn't just straight interview, but it would be almost like documentary, so pulling in other voices, and our drip feed stuff on socials. But is there any kind of like advice on stuff that you would like to see in terms of this area on socials or in media in general?
Like, I don't know what the word is, but like, there's so much propaganda within these circles, and I would love to see something that cuts through that and speaks for all sides. So we're not here to bash veganism. Okay, so if you're vegan, you're listening to this, you might be feeling offended by some of the things we're saying, but that's not our intention, right? And also, I'm not trying to bash being carnivore. I'm not trying to. Can we bring everything together under the same umbrella and look at it all and go like these are all beneficial in their own unique ways to different people at different times throughout their lives. So instead of putting this bad stamp on stuff or this good stamp on stuff, kind of looking at the overall diet culture and eating habits, and just observing them instead of trying to critique and and bash the other. What I'm seeing now is just division. I'm seeing division between carnivore and keto carnivore and meat-based, and then meat-based carnivore and veganism, and then people who just don't give a fuck and just want to eat whatever they want. There's just so much conflict over it, and I think there's space for all of us.
I'm really interested in the more sociology culture approach, where's advertising and propaganda and like a little bit of that. What do they want us to be eating? Without getting again too sticky into anything that's like too heavy up here. But zooming out and being like, what's actually going on here? What did lockdown do to how everyone wanted to eat? Because I know that I was just lived on bread during then.
I'm kind of like what I'm wanting to do is to almost do what you guys did when you transitioned to meat based, and that's to give people permission to try something, either whether they're on the extreme end of it is to to try and not be 100% carnivore. Maybe it's meat based, so you make meat your foundation, and then if you're on the kind of the vegan end of things, is not be 100% vegan. Make meat your foundation, and throw in some just see what happens, because I think there's a lot of misleading and misguided information, and you need to be one thing, or you need to follow one path, when potentially potentially being in the grey area is probably healthier for you than just choosing black and white side, if you know what I mean. So I agree. Well, guys, thank you for this. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm gonna, because I'm in between work, I'm gonna see how quickly I can put some bits and pieces together. But there's a lot of gold in this, so yeah, you're giving me a lot of work to do actually, because I have to go through this and chop bits up. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. Cheers.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Nice one.
Thanks
Thank you so much, man.
You enjoy the rest of your day
Thanks,
too.
guys. Take it easy, man. Thank you. Bye.
We got. See you later. See ya.